In our headlines on this Tuesday, June 17, here in South Korea. Upon arrival in Canada, President Lee Jae-myung dove right into his sideline diplomatic engagements, sitting down separately with his counterparts from South Africa and Australia. Staying in Canada, US President Donald Trump made an early exit from the Group of Seven gathering, citing the escalating tensions in the Middle East as Israel and Iran continue to trade fire. And speaking of the situation in the Middle East, an Israeli airstrike hits an Iranian state-run broadcaster during a live newscast, forcing the female anchor to flee from the desk. We begin with dramatic footage from the Iranian state-run broadcaster as its female anchor was forced to flee from set following an Israeli air assault during a live newscast. Our Lee Seung-jae starts us off.
The Israeli military launched an airstrike against Iran's state-run broadcaster IRIB on Monday after it issued a warning for Tehran's District 3, where the broadcaster is located.
آنچه که ملاحظه کردید، صدایی که شنیدید، فضای غبارآلود استادیوم.
Israel's Defense Minister Israel Katz confirmed the attack, saying that the Iranian propaganda and incitement mouthpiece is on its way to disappear. Iran's foreign ministry quickly condemned the attack, calling it a wicked act that constitutes a war crime, as it targeted journalists. Meanwhile, in an ABC News interview aired on Monday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said he believes killing Iran's supreme leader would end the conflict between Israel and Iran. Netanyahu said Ali Khamenei tweeted almost every day, "Death to Israel." ABC anchor Jonathan Karl quickly asked if Israel was going to target the supreme leader, to which the Israeli leader said that they're doing what needs to be done, but did not go into details. Netanyahu added that such action would not escalate tensions, instead end them. In the meantime, the USS Nimitz aircraft carrier was rerouted from the South China Sea to the Middle East on Monday, meaning the U.S. will have 2 aircraft carriers in the region. Dozens of Air Force refueling aircraft also left U.S. bases over the weekend for Europe, a move seen as a preventive measure to support any operation in the Middle East. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
In related news, the Group of Seven over in Canada is blaming Iran and its pursuit of nuclear weapons for the latest military confrontation in the Middle East. Our Kim Bo-kyung has more.
The Group of Seven leaders have urged Iran for a de-escalation in the Middle East, showing unified support for Israel. Through the joint statement issued on Monday local time, and while saying that Israel has a right to defend itself, the leaders condemned Iran for being the principal source of regional instability and terror, and highlighted that Iran can never have nuclear weapons. De-escalation was not the only topic for the G7 leaders. Citing risk to global economic stability, the leaders pushed for U.S. President Donald Trump to ease off the trade war. As the U.S. plans to impose even steeper tariffs on countries across the world, they argued that such a dispute would only weaken G7 economies and rather strengthen China. The countries did use the summit as a chance to reach a trade agreement with the U.S. Before his abrupt departure, U.S. President Donald Trump held talks with G7 leaders, and the United Kingdom was able to sign a trade deal. The agreement sets the tax on British autos at 10% from the end of the month, down from the current 27.5%, up to a quota of 100,000 vehicles a year, and removes the U.S. tariffs on UK aerospace products.
This now implements on car tariffs and aerospace, our really important agreement, and so this is a very good day for both of our countries, a real sign of strength.
A final agreement to cut the tax on British steel to zero has not yet been reached. Meanwhile, other countries could not see breakthroughs. But following talks between Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney and Trump, the Canadian government indicated that there could be a trade agreement within 30 days. Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba reportedly discussed a solution that aligns with Japan's national interests during a 30-minute conversation with President Trump, but said there still are existing differences that needed to be worked out. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Also in Canada, upon arrival there on Monday, President Lee Jae-myung sat down separately with his counterparts from South Africa and Australia ahead of the extended G7 session on Tuesday local time. Our top office correspondent Yoon Jung-min is part of the traveling press corps and files this report from Calgary.
On his way to Canada to attend the G7 summit, South Korea's new president Lee Jae-myung was asked about the timing of the G7 summit during an impromptu press conference on board Korea's Air Force One.
지금 취임한 지 며칠 되지 않아서 국제회의에 참석하는 건 무리가 있는 게 분명합니다. 이 국제사회에 대한민국이 신속하게 정상화됐다는 것을 좀 보여주는 게 필요하다라는 의견도 있었고.
By that, he meant filling the leadership vacuum following the martial law incident. The president started off his resumption of summit diplomacy by holding bilateral meetings with invited non-G7 countries, South Africa and Australia, on his first day in Canada. President Lee met South African President Cyril Ramaphosa and Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese separately, and in those meetings, he addressed cooperation on the economy and energy, building upon friendships dating back to the Korean War over 7 decades ago. Also addressed was regional security surrounding the Korean peninsula. Lee also invited Albanese to the APEC summit in Korea, while Ramaphosa invited Lee to the G20 summit in South Africa later this year. In the evening, President Lee and First Lady Kim Hae-kyung were hosted by Canada for dinner. Also in the South Korean president's mind for this trip was trade with the U.S., but his expected meeting with President Trump fell through as the American leader cut short his trip to the G7, citing the crisis in the Middle East.
The U.S. side contacted us, asking for our understanding for what has happened.
President Lee's summit with Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba is slated for Tuesday, local time.
Earlier on board the Air Force One, President Lee did note that he seeks to yield results that are mutually beneficial when it comes to trade talks with the U.S. The Trump administration's deadline for tariff negotiations is set for early July. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News, Calgary.
Meanwhile, in other news, despite expectations that the benchmark KOSPI would soar past the 3,000 mark in its session today, it closed trade just below that level. Park Junan has the closing numbers.
South Korea's benchmark KOSPI ended trading on Tuesday at 2,950.3 points. This marks a 0.12% increase from Monday's market close. The stocks that drove market momentum were South Korea's tech giants, Samsung Electronics and SK hynix. As of 2:15 p.m., Samsung Electronics, which makes up about 12.4% of the benchmark index, climbed 2.7% to 58,901. While SK hynix, accounting for around 6.5% of the market, briefly hit an all-time high of 260,001 before slipping to 250,001.
The index recently had already moved up while semiconductor stocks lagged. But as AI demand continues to grow, a positive outlook for chip stocks is being rebuilt, particularly around SK hynix, which remains competitive in AI-related memory products, especially high-bandwidth memory.
With the KOSPI now at a critical turning point, shifting from the current 2,000 level toward the 3,000 mark, both domestic and global investors are closely monitoring the situation to see whether it can break through and sustain a position above 3,000. Although South Korean stocks have gained momentum to bounce back from early April's yearly low, there are global uncertainties that could bring volatility to the market. The Middle Eastern conflicts between Israel and Iran could significantly impact global stocks and oil prices if the situation escalates. Moreover, on Wednesday local time, the U.S. Federal Reserve will make a decision on the country's interest rate. Although the market is expecting interest rates to remain unchanged, Fed Chair Jerome Powell's forecast about the country's economy could affect not only the U.S. stock markets, but also South Korean stocks. On the domestic front, as the Lee Jae-myung administration prepares a supplementary budget worth around 20 trillion won, or about $14.6 billion, the stock market could experience volatility depending on the scope, funding sources, and market expectations surrounding the plan. Park Jun-han, Arirang News.
Korea's overseas shipments of automobiles lost ground in May, and trade officials here are linking the decline to a number of factors. Our Moon Ji-young reports.
South Korea's car exports shrank last month as outbound shipments to the U.S. sharply dropped on Washington's hefty tariff on imported vehicles. That's according to the latest automotive trend report released by the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy on Tuesday, which showed the country's auto exports came at $6.2 billion, down over 4% from a year earlier. The figure marks the second consecutive month of decreases, but is the second highest export value for any May. In terms of volume, exports fell by more than 3% on year. However, exports of eco-friendly vehicles went up more than 10% to record a new monthly high thanks to strong demand for hybrid cars. The Trade Ministry attributed the overall decrease in auto exports to a base effect from a record monthly figure posted a year earlier and the impacts of the Trump administration's 25% tariff on all imported cars and auto parts. Exports to the U.S. decreased by more than 27% on year in May. The ministry further explained that this decrease appears to have been influenced by the start of mass local production at Hyundai Motor Group's Meta Plant America in the U.S. state of Georgia. Meanwhile, here at home, sales of eco-friendly cars have increased by 39% from the previous year and now exceeds sales of gasoline-powered cars for the first time ever. This is driven by strong demand for hybrid cars, with sales rising more than 31% year-on-year, as well as EVs and plug-in hybrids. In terms of domestic production, South Korean car makers produced 3.1% fewer vehicles compared to the previous year, recording 359,000 units due to decreased exports. Moon Ji-young, Arirang News.
The Japanese embassy here in Seoul hosted a reception Monday evening to celebrate 6 decades of diplomatic relations between South Korea and Japan this year. Now, a similar event is scheduled to be hosted by the Korean embassy in Tokyo on Thursday. Our foreign affairs correspondent Oh Soo-young reports.
From historic highs and lows, South Korea and Japan are pledging to move forward, hand in hand towards a better future. That was the message from President Lee Jae-myung and senior diplomats as both nations marked 60 years since normalizing bilateral relations. On Monday, the Japanese embassy in Seoul hosted the reception to mark the milestone, reflecting on the 1965 Treaty on Basic Relations, signed 20 years after Korea's liberation from Japanese colonial rule at the end of World War II. They also agreed on economic cooperation and a claim settlement, under which Japan provided $300 million in grants and $200 million in loans over 10 years. Over the past 6 decades, annual trade between the two neighbors has surged from just $200 million to around $70 billion last year, a 350-fold increase. And people traveling between the two countries, numbering around 10,000 in 1965, has now surpassed 12 million a year. But history remains a sensitive fault line. Japan's wartime forced labour, its sexual enslavement of so-called comfort women, and territorial disputes have long fueled friction, which spiralled in 2019 into a full-blown diplomatic and trade standoff. The Yoon Suk-yeol government moved to mend ties, restoring reciprocal visits between the leaders and strengthening trilateral cooperation with the United States. President Lee Jae-myung has signalled continued engagement, speaking via video due to his trip to Canada to attend the G7 summit.
격변하는 국제 정세 속에서 우리 양국은 함께 대응 방안을 모색해야 하는 중요한 파트너입니다.
Japan's ambassador Mitsushima Koichi said the two nations should now build new momentum for the decades ahead and emphasize the importance of trilateral ties with the US. Japan's special advisor to the Prime Minister Nagashima Akihisa, who also heads the Japan-Korea Parliamentarians Union, called for broader cooperation.
Expanding bilateral communication and cooperation is no longer a choice, but a necessity. This applies across various sectors, including security, economy, energy, technology, and culture.
The commemorations will continue on Thursday in Tokyo, where Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba is set to attend a corresponding reception hosted by the Korean Embassy. But first, President Yi and Prime Minister Ishiba could well hold their first meeting on the sidelines of the G7 summit. Seong, Arirang News.
Today, that is June 17th, is the final day of a relatively early summer festival in the city of Gimpo, just ahead of the heavy rain forecast for this coming weekend here in the Greater Seoul area. Our Pyongyang was there.
This summer is forecast to be hotter than usual. Heavy rainfall is expected to start in June. And what better way to make most of the sweltering heat and rain than water sports?
Here at the Gimpo Aramarine Festival, visitors can kayak, slide down water slides, and splash the heat away.
Following its roaring success over the past years, the Gimpo Aramarine Festival came back this year, this time running for 4 days. The festival centers on the theme of connecting water and the environment with culture.
This year marks the 9th edition of the Gimpo Aramarine Festival. Our main programs include the Pori Race, various water leisure activities, and a yacht competition. We're doing our best to offer fun and exciting experiences not only for Gimpo residents, but for visitors from all over.
Running from June 14th to 17th, the event offers more than just water sports. A dance competition and live performances by popular artists add to the energy and excitement. Visitors can also explore community partnership booths, offering hands-on experiences linked to water and sustainability.
Oh, we heard there are lots of fun activities for kids to enjoy here, so we decided to come.
At the carbon-neutral wooden play experience booth, children play with eco-friendly wooden toys while learning about carbon neutrality. And when charming stars stole the show, the festival's duck mascot, Pori. Gimpo has a unique tradition of using ducks in rice farming to control pests, an eco-friendly practice that inspired the city's lovable duck mascot. On Sunday, the ducks made a splashy return in the annual rubber duck race, now with the brand new name, Pori Race. The name Pori is a playful blend of Gimpo and ori, the Korean word for duck, and was selected through a public naming contest. With rubber ducks raining from the sky, the Pori Race once again filled the city with smiles and laughter. According to officials, an estimated 80,000 visitors attended the festival over the weekend. Pyongyang, Arirang News.
Korean researchers have advanced the accuracy of wearable healthcare gadgets aimed at monitoring blood pressure. Our Jin explains.
Monitoring blood pressure as part of personal health care has become even more important, as cardiovascular diseases like stroke or heart failure are the leading cause of global death. However, existing healthcare devices for blood pressure monitoring are cumbersome or inconvenient to use. Some smartwatches that aid in health monitoring can measure heart rate by detecting changes in blood volume. But the use of optical sensors limits their accuracy for it to meet the standards of a healthcare device. LED-based photoplethysmography, or PPG technology, only uses between 1 and 4 LEDs in its sensors. Now, a research team from the Korea Advanced Institute of Science and Technology has developed a highly sensitive, wearable piezoelectric blood pressure sensor that utilizes up to 50 LEDs, making it much more sensitive, therefore significantly improving its accuracy.
By maintaining a higher spectral resolution, more signals can be emitted in a tighter and smaller wavelength range. With extensively more wavelengths measured at the same time, even when there is distortion, high accuracy can be guaranteed.
Ultra-thin piezoelectric sensors with a thickness of several micrometers, which is thinner than human hair, remain in conformal contact with the skin, allowing for the successful collection of accurate blood pressure from the subtle pulsation of the blood vessels.
Blood pressure levels can be measured not only during workouts, but in daily life, and even while sleeping. Because the spectroscope was made very small, it can easily be applied to wearable devices.
Continuous monitoring of blood pressure changes can help prevent cardiovascular-related diseases. The research team plans to develop a wireless blood pressure measuring device through follow-up research and to commercialize it before too long. Jin, Arirang News.
This is The World Now, bringing you the latest stories from around the globe. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, heavy weekend rains in the capital Kinshasa have triggered floods and landslides that have claimed at least 29 lives. Kinshasa Governor Daniel Bumba said on Sunday local time that sudden downpours, unusually heavy for the dry season, dumped nearly 90 millimeters of rain across the city on Saturday. Drone footage on Monday showed the devastation as the storm overwhelmed drainage systems and walls. Roads and bridges have been swept away and many neighborhoods saw power outages. Rescues are underway with affected residents relocated to temporary shelters. Kinshasa lies on the Congo River and many residents live in areas vulnerable to flooding. More than 30 people died in Kinshasa in April, also due to flash floods. Denmark has launched a trial of uncrewed robotic sail drones, nicknamed Voyagers, to enhance maritime surveillance across the Baltic and North Seas. Two of the Voyagers, built by California-based company Saildrone, were deployed by Denmark's armed forces on Monday from the port of Cage, south of the capital, Copenhagen. The 10-meter-long unmanned surface drones, which resemble ordinary sailboats, are powered by wind and solar energy and are equipped with radar, optical, and infrared cameras, as well as sonar and acoustic sensors for monitoring purposes. They're set to patrol Danish and NATO waters autonomously for 3 months. Their operation follows testing in early June when two Voyagers joined NATO's maritime patrols. Saildrone's founder and CEO said the vessels provide a full picture of what's above and below the surface to about 30 to 50 kilometers in the open ocean. The Trump Organization, led by U.S. President Donald Trump's two sons, unveiled a new mobile network named Trump Mobile on Monday. The service launches on the 10th anniversary of Trump's presidential campaign announcement. It is priced at $47 45 cents per month, symbolically referencing Trump's positions as the 45th and 47th president. The offering includes the T1 phone, a gold-hued Android smartphone, priced at $499, made in the U.S., targeting conservative consumers seeking an American-made alternative. The phone is set for release in August or September. The 2025 Paris Air Show kicked off at the Le Bourget Airport on Monday local time, displaying various civilian and military aerial vehicles. However, France has ordered the closure of 4 major Israeli defense companies' stands after exhibitors refused to stop displaying attack weapons, citing the escalation in the Gaza conflict. Israeli President Isaac Herzog condemned it as outrageous and unprecedented, accusing Paris of politically motivated discrimination. He went on to compare the blacked-out booths to a Jewish ghetto. The Paris Air Show will open to the public until June 20th. Choi Ji-hee, Arirang News.
Unlike yesterday, we'll get hotter and hotter from today. Today's daytime temperature in Seoul rose to up to 29 degrees Celsius, which is about 4 degrees higher than yesterday. As heat with humid air comes in, it will rise to 31 degrees tomorrow, and it feels even hotter than the actual readings across the country. With summer heat, the ultraviolet index is also strong from the morning. It will start at high to very high levels in the morning, then soar to very high levels all over the country in the afternoon. Please stay out of the sunshine when it gets to its peak. Tomorrow morning will start warming around 20 to 21 degrees in most parts of the country. Highs will move up to 32 degrees in Gwangju, 26 degrees in Busan. Rain is expected from Thursday night for central parts of the country and western parts of Jeollabuk-do province. Then it will spread nationwide on Friday and Saturday. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Right, those are the headlines at this hour. Thank you for watching. Coming up next is our daily panel session.